Have you ever watched a dead man perform? I don't mean in an old movie, a preserved piece of celluloid history. I mean a fresh performance, uploaded just hours before the final curtain call. My brother, Alex, gave the performance of his life the day before he died. And for the past 7 days, since the funeral, his ghost has been doing encores to an audience of millions. The applause has been deafening. The silence in my apartment was its own kind of noise, a low hum that vibrated behind my eyeballs. For a week, it had been my only shield against the rising tide of notifications, tributes, and algorithm-fueled grief from people who had never known him. My job as a museum archivist is to preserve the past, to catalog truth in acid-free boxes. But what do you do when your brother's legacy is a lie, and that lie is the only thing the world wants to remember? My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a familiar tremor running up my arm. I'd avoided this for a week, clinging to the quiet dignity of my own sorrow. It felt like a betrayal to even type his name into the search bar. Not his real name, Alexander Petrov, but his brand. Alex Unfiltered. The irony was so bitter it coated my tongue. Everything about him was filtered, polished, and packaged for mass consumption. There it was, the channel page. An explosion of neon thumbnails and all-caps titles designed to scream for attention. His face, contorted into a dozen exaggerated expressions of shock, joy, and mock terror, stared back at me. A digital mosaic of a man I barely recognized. The subscriber count was still climbing. 10 million, 11, a ticker tape parade for a tragedy. The comments section was a waterfall of broken heart emojis and saccharine platitudes. A legend gone too soon. Your light will never fade, Alex. Did any of them even see him? I clicked on the last video, the one uploaded the day before. The thumbnail was him, beaming, pointing at bold yellow text, the biggest announcement of my life. It had 30 million views. My stomach clenched. I knew that smile. It was his on-camera smile, a carefully constructed curve of the lips that never, ever reached his eyes. It was the smile he used when the anxiety was gnawing at him, the one that said, "I'm fine. I'm fantastic. Please believe me." The video started with a blast of upbeat electronic music. Then, there he was, 25 forever. Sitting in his sterile white studio, the ring light turning his eyes into vacant, shimmering pools. "What is up, unfiltered fam?" he yelled, his voice a pitch too high, stretched thin with forced enthusiasm. "I hope you are having an absolutely epic day, because I am about to make it even better." He clapped his hands together, a sharp, percussive sound in the high-quality audio, a sound that made me flinch. He talked for 3 minutes about his journey, about the fans, about how their support had changed his life. He used all the right words: gratitude, community, love. But I watched his hands. He kept clenching them into fists below the frame, just out of the camera's main view, thinking no one would notice. I noticed. I saw the knuckles, white with strain. I saw the pulse beating frantically in the side of his neck. Do you know what happens when you spend your life becoming a product? You start to believe you're disposable. "And now," he said, leaning into the camera, his fake smile stretching wider, "the reason you're all here. For the past 6 months, I have been working on the biggest project of my entire life. Something that's going to change everything. It's a secret I've been dying to tell you." He let out a sharp, empty laugh at his choice of words. A ghost in the machine, indeed. He promised a reveal, a new chapter, a revolution for the channel. His eyes, though, they were pleading, looking right past the lens, into some unseen, unbearable distance. The video ended with a freeze frame on his triumphant, empty face and a link to his merchandise store. I stared at the screen for a long time, the silence of my apartment rushing back in to fill the void he'd left. The world was mourning Alex Unfiltered, the charismatic, high-energy creator. They were buying t-shirts to commemorate a brand, but I was the archivist of Alex Petrov, the quiet, sad boy who loved old books and hated being the center of attention. And I was the only one who saw the last message in his video. It wasn't an announcement. It was a suicide note. And nobody heard it. What is the half-life of grief? In our family, it was about 10 days, the time between the funeral and the wake, where grief was no longer a private agony, but a public performance. The house was filled with the cloying scent of lilies and catered sandwiches. Strangers, people I'd never seen before, patted my arm and told me how much Alex's content had meant to them, their voices hushed with a reverence he never received in life. They were mourning a persona, a carefully edited version of my brother. My parents moved through the crowd like ghosts in their own home, their faces etched with a sorrow so deep it looked like a physical weight. But underneath it, I could feel the hum of a different anxiety. The unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the second mortgage. They weren't just mourning their son, they were mourning their savior. Alex had been their lottery ticket, and his death was the sound of that ticket being torn in half. Or so I thought. That's when he appeared, Derek. I spotted him cutting a path through the somber crowd, a shark in a sea of mourners. He wore a suit so sharp it could have drawn blood, and a watch on his wrist that was worth more than my car. He was Alex's manager, the architect of the Alex Unfiltered brand. He was the man who had taught my brother how to trade pieces of his soul for subscribers. He moved with an unnerving energy, a predator who smelled opportunity where everyone else only smelled death. He reached us, a small circle of immediate family, and placed a hand on my father's shoulder. His face was a mask of practiced solemnity. "I am so sorry for your loss," he said, his voice a perfectly modulated hum of corporate empathy. Alex was more than a client. He was a visionary, a true force of nature. My mother let out a small sob. My father just nodded, his eyes glassy. I felt a cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach. I knew this wasn't about condolences. It was a prelude. "The outpouring of love has been incredible," Derek continued, his eyes scanning the room as if calculating the room's emotional ROI. "The engagement is through the roof. His last video is breaking records." He said engagement like a doctor reading a vital sign from a chart. A sign of life from a dead man. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that those numbers were just vultures circling a corpse, but I was frozen by the sheer breathtaking audacity of it all. He lowered his voice, creating a bubble of intimacy, of conspiracy. "We have a unique opportunity here," he murmured, his tone shifting from respectful mourner to excited strategist. "Alex, he was always working. He left behind hundreds of hours of unedited material, challenges, vlogs, confessionals, a treasure trove. We can keep his channel alive, keep his memory alive." He looked directly at my parents, his eyes gleaming with a salesman's fervor. My father, who had barely spoken a complete sentence in a week, looked up. A flicker of something, not hope, but a desperate, grasping calculation entered his eyes. My mother wiped her tears, her expression confused. "Keep it alive?" she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "What do you mean?" I saw the trap being laid, the bait being dangled in front of two people drowning in debt and despair. "I mean we continue the uploads," Derek said, his voice firm and reassuring. "We can create a content schedule that will last for years. It's what he would have wanted, to keep giving back to the community he built, to secure his legacy." He paused, letting the words hang in the air before delivering the final venomous strike. "And of course, to secure the financial future he worked so hard to build for you. And there it was. The business proposal. A post-mortem content strategy. A plan to puppeteer my brother's digital ghost for profit. It wasn't about memory or legacy. It was about monetization. It was about turning my brother's death into the next big project he had promised in that final, awful video. I looked at my parents' faces and saw the poison beginning to work. The conflict in my mother's eyes, the grim resolve hardening in my father's jaw. Derek had just offered them a way to resurrect their son, not as a person, but as an asset. And I had a horrifying feeling they were going to take it. Have you ever tried to reason with a ghost? Not the dead one, but the ghost of an idea. The specter of financial salvation. After Derek left, that ghost settled in our kitchen, sitting at the table with us, whispering promises into my parents' ears. The scent of lilies had been replaced by the stale metallic smell of desperation. The polite hum of the wake was gone, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like it was actively listening. My mother was the first to speak, her voice thin and fragile, as if testing the air for resistance. He was so passionate about his work, Lena. He loved his subscribers. She wasn't looking at me, but at her hands, which were methodically shredding a paper napkin into a tiny, pathetic pile. She was building a defense, a fortress of denial, brick by flimsy brick. I knew what was coming. This was the opening argument in a trial for my brother's soul. My father, ever the pragmatist, cleared his throat. He gestured vaguely at the room, at the house itself. This life, Lena. Alex built it, for us. This house, the cars, it's all from him. We can't just let it all crumble. His grief was real, I knew that, but it was being eclipsed by a more immediate terror. The terror of the final notice, the foreclosure sign. They weren't just his parents. They were his dependents. A fact that had surely weighed on Alex as much as the mortgage itself. So that's it? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. We just put his ghost on a payroll? We prop up his corpse and make it dance for the algorithm because we're in debt? The words were acid. I saw my mother flinch. My father's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing in his cheek. He saw it as a solution, a lifeline. I saw it as necrophilia, a digital desecration for profit. What is the line between honoring a legacy and exploiting a tragedy? My parents were about to erase it. Don't you dare use that tone, my father snapped, his voice cracking with a mixture of anger and pain. You don't understand. You were never part of his world. You with your quiet books and your dusty artifacts. Alex lived for this. He lived for the connection, the energy. He was defending the brand, the shiny, hollow shell of Alex Unfiltered, because it was easier than confronting the broken boy who had died inside it. The boy they had both failed to see. Alex would have wanted this, my mother whispered, and the words struck me with the force of a physical blow. It was the ultimate justification, the sacred, unprovable claim of the grieving. He would want to take care of us. He always wanted to take care of us. She was twisting his love for them into a posthumous contract, an eternal obligation. She was remembering the provider, not the son. It was a choice, a conscious act of self-preservation that felt like the deepest betrayal of all. I stood up, the legs of my chair scraping against the tile. The sound was violent in the quiet room. No, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Alex would have wanted to be free. He's finally free of the pressure, of the character he had to play every single day. And you want to chain him back to it? For money? The accusation hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. They looked at me, not as their daughter, but as an obstacle. A problem to be managed. The battle lines were drawn, right here in the heart of our home. They had made their choice. They would be the caretakers of his brand. That left me to be the guardian of his soul. How many locks protect a human soul? For most of us, they are metaphorical. For my brother, the final one was a string of characters I was now expected to unearth. The call came on a Tuesday, a day of suffocating normalcy. It was my mother, her voice a carefully constructed blend of maternal warmth and raw panic. Derek was growing impatient. The content machine was idle, and the investors, the sponsors, the entire digital ecosystem built around my dead brother required feeding. They didn't ask me to come over. They summoned me. I found them in the living room, sitting side by side on the sofa like defendants awaiting a verdict. Between them on the coffee table sat a sleek, black external hard drive. It was an object both alien and intimate, a digital mausoleum. He protected it with a password, my father said, skipping any preamble. Derek's tech guys tried the usual combinations. Nothing. It's encrypted. His voice was flat, the voice of a man discussing a logistical problem, not his son's last secrets. We thought, you two were always so close, my mother began, her hands twisting in her lap. Especially when you were children. Maybe he used something from back then? A secret word? A nickname? She looked at me with pleading eyes, the same look she used to give me when she wanted me to let Alex win at a board game. A look that asked me to sacrifice a small piece of myself for the sake of peace, for the sake of an easier path. Only this time, the stakes were infinitely higher. I felt a surge of nausea. They were asking me to turn our shared childhood into a key, to commodify our memories, and hand them over to a man who would dissect them for parts. You want me to help you break into his mind? I asked, the words tasting like poison. So you can sell off the pieces? It's not like that, Lena, my father insisted, his patience wearing thin. This is his legacy. It's all that's left. Are you going to let it all rot on that thing because of some misplaced sentiment? I looked from his hardened face to my mother's tear-streaked one. I was trapped. To refuse was to be the cruel daughter. To agree was to be a traitor to my brother. So I sat down, a Judas in a cardigan. They gave me his laptop, and I connected the drive. The password prompt blinked on the screen, a single, insistent cursor. A digital gatekeeper. I started with the obvious. His birthday. Mine. Their anniversary. Our childhood address. Denied. 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 With each failure, a small dark part of me felt a flicker of relief. Maybe his ghost was stronger than their greed. I moved on, digging deeper into the archive of our lives. The name of his first favorite band. The title of the fantasy novel we'd read a dozen times. The stupid catchphrase from a cartoon we both loved. Nothing. My parents watched my every move, their silence a crushing weight. This wasn't just a search. It was a performance. I was the memory keeper, the one who was supposed to know him best, and I was failing. I closed my eyes, pushing away the image of their desperate faces, and tried to remember the real Alex. Not the brand, but the boy. The boy who was afraid of the dark, who told me all his secrets, who named the stray dog we found and cried for a week when it ran away. The dog's name. A scruffy mutt we'd called Buster. It was a memory so pure, so untouched by the unfiltered world. It was a secret that belonged only to us. My fingers trembled as I typed it. Buster. I hit enter. The password box vanished. A window opened, revealing a grid of folders. Access granted. I had betrayed him with a memory of love. What's the real difference between an archivist and a thief? One has permission. As the folders populated the screen, my parents let out a shared sigh of pure, unadulterated relief. It was the sound of a looming financial execution being stayed. My father reached for the drive, his movements quick and eager. I'll call Derek, let him know we're in. My hand shot out and covered the small black rectangle, my palm suddenly slick with sweat. "Wait," I said, my voice barely a whisper. They both stared at me, their brief moment of joy instantly replaced by suspicion. My mind raced, scrambling for a reason, a justification that wasn't the raw, screaming truth. "I can't let you give this away until I know what you're selling." My profession became my shield. "I need to catalog the contents first. I have to create an index of the files, organize them. We can't just hand over a chaotic mess. We need to know the asset's full value." I used their language. Asset. The word felt like swallowing glass, but it worked. My father paused, his business sense overriding his impatience. He nodded slowly. "Good thinking. Make a list. We'll show Derek we're organized, that we're partners in this." My mother, ever the peacemaker, just looked relieved that a new fight wasn't brewing. They left me there, in the living room, with the digital extension of my brother's mind. They thought I was taking inventory. I was about to conduct an autopsy. I carried the laptop and the hard drive to my old room, closing the door behind me. I needed the illusion of privacy, of sanctity, for the violation I was about to commit. The file system was meticulously, clinically organized. Folders were labeled with the soulless jargon of a content creator. Q3 challenges raw, sponsor integrations final, y thumbnails PSD. It was a factory floor with raw materials, assembly lines, and finished products all neatly compartmentalized. This was the public face, the brand. I scrolled through the grid of folders, a digital graveyard of manufactured joy. And then I saw it. It was almost invisible, a folder that was a slightly paler shade of blue than the others, as if it had been made transparent. A ghost in the machine. Its name wasn't a marketing term. It was a single, stark word, real. What if the truth wasn't buried deep, but just hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to look closely enough? My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the place a person hides things not from the world, but from their own professional life. A place of refuge. My cursor hovered over the folder for a full minute. Every instinct I had as an archivist, a preserver of truth, screamed at me to click. Every instinct I had as a sister warned me that I was about to cross a line from which there was no return. I clicked. There were no subfolders inside, just a long list of video files. And their names weren't project titles. They were dates. October 5th, November 12th, the day after, the convention. A cold dread, mingled with a terrible, undeniable vindication, washed over me. These weren't for the channel. This wasn't content. This was a diary. This was his confession. I had been sent to find the raw materials for a business, and instead, I had found a last will and testament. Do you know what a soul sounds like when it's breaking? It isn't a scream. It's a quiet, tired whisper in a poorly lit room, recorded at 3 in the morning. I spent that night in my childhood bedroom, the laptop screen casting a ghostly pallor on the walls, listening to my brother die in slow motion. The first video I clicked was dated 6 months ago. The man on the screen was a stranger, not Alex Unfiltered, but a tired-looking young man swimming in a branded hoodie. The bright ring light was off, and in the harsh glare of a single desk lamp, I could see the acne scars on his cheeks that his professional setup always hid. He wasn't performing. He was just talking. To the void. To the unblinking eye of the webcam. "I had a meeting with Derek today," he said, his voice raspy. "He wants me to do a 24-hour buried alive challenge. Said the metrics for claustrophobia content are insane." I just sat there and nodded. He scrubbed his hands over his face. "I feel like a product. Like a piece of meat they keep testing to see how much seasoning it can take before it goes bad." The video ended abruptly. No outro music, no call to action, just the click of the mouse. I fell down the rabbit hole, one dated file after another. I watched him after a fan convention, sitting in a sterile hotel room, looking hollowed out. 1,000 people told me they loved me today, he said, his gaze fixed on a spot on the wall. And I have never felt so completely, utterly alone. I watched him confess that he hated the pranks, that the forced laughter felt like swallowing shards of glass, that the pressure to be constantly on was eroding his very sense of self. It was a chronological catalog of his own erasure. The final video was time-stamped just 3 hours before he died. The thumbnail was a blurry image of the ceiling. When I pressed play, the camera was pointing at his face, but he was too close, the angle unflattering and raw. His eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, his face blotchy. He was crying, but not for the camera. It was a deep, ragged, hopeless sobbing that seemed to be pulled from the very marrow of his bones. For a long time, that was the only sound. Then, he spoke, his voice a shattered whisper, a direct plea to an unknown future viewer. To me. I can't pretend anymore. I can't be this person, this thing they built. He took a shuddering breath, looking directly into the lens, and for the first time I saw my brother again, the little boy I grew up with, scared and lost. Please, he begged, the word of final, desperate prayer. If anyone ever sees this, just erase everything. Please, erase me. The screen went black. The silence that followed was louder than any of his videos. I now held his last will and testament, and it was a declaration of war against my own family. How much does the truth weigh? In my hands, it weighed exactly 1.2 pounds, the physical weight of the external hard drive, but its psychic gravity was enough to bend the world around me. I hadn't slept. Sleep was a luxury for people who weren't haunted by their brother's final, desperate plea. For 12 hours, I had been the sole custodian of his true legacy, and the responsibility felt like it was calcifying my bones, turning me from a grieving sister into something harder, an executor, an avenger. I didn't wait for them to call me. I initiated the meeting. My text was cold and clinical. I've completed the initial content audit. We need to have a meeting with Derek, my apartment, 2 p.m. Using their corporate language felt like donning armor. It established a new dynamic. I was no longer the quiet, sentimental daughter. I was a stakeholder with critical information. My apartment was neutral ground, a place where I, for the first time, would have the home field advantage. They arrived together, my parents and Derek, a united front of determined exploitation. They walked into my quiet, book-lined living room looking like a corporate raiding party. Derek was radiating impatient energy, already mentally counting the money. My parents just looked anxious, desperate for the good news they were sure I was about to deliver. They saw the hard drive connected to my laptop on the coffee table, and their expressions relaxed. They thought I had prepared a feast for them. They had no idea I was about to serve them a verdict. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steady, a skill honed from years of presenting findings to museum boards. As requested, I went through the drive to catalog the assets. Derek leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eye. "And? What's the payload? How many hours are we talking?" He spoke as if they were drilling for oil. My father nodded along, eager for the numbers. I let the question hang in the air for a moment, the silence stretching uncomfortably. "I found all the content you were expecting," I said, looking from Derek to my father and then to my mother. "The raw footage for challenges, the sponsored clips, the vlogs. It's all there. Hundreds of hours, just as you hoped." I watched the relief wash over their faces, lulling them into a false sense of security. "But I also found something you weren't expecting, a hidden folder. his personal video diaries. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air grew thick, heavy with dawning apprehension. I didn't need to play the videos. Their power was in the truth they held, a truth I now wielded like a weapon. For the last 6 months, Alex recorded himself. Not Alex Unfiltered, just Alex. He talked about the pressure. He talked about how he felt like a commodity, a product. He talked about how much he hated the character he had to play. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. My father's face went pale. Derek's expression hardened into a mask of cold fury. I looked directly at them, my voice dropping but gaining an edge of steel. I recited his last words from memory, letting them land in the silent room like stones dropped into a deep well. His last entry was recorded hours before he died. He was crying, and he said, "I can't pretend anymore. Please, if anyone ever sees this, just erase everything." I paused, letting the full weight of his final wish settle upon them. So that is what we are going to do. We are not publishing anything. We will not be handing this drive over to anyone. We are going to fulfill his last request. We are shutting down the channel. The silence that followed my declaration was not empty. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and civility from the room. My mother made a small, wounded sound like a bird hitting a window pane. My father's face was a thundercloud of disbelief and dawning fury. But it was Derek who moved first. He didn't shout. He laughed. It was a short, sharp, incredulous bark of a laugh that was more insulting than any yell. "Are you kidding me?" he said, shaking his head as if I were a child who had just suggested burning a winning lottery ticket. "You're going to throw away a multi-million-dollar asset because of some depressive episode he recorded? Lena, I have a contract. Signed by Alex. It grants my company exclusive rights to all content produced for the Alex Unfiltered brand, recorded or otherwise. That hard drive is not your personal property. It's a corporate asset." His words were designed to reframe the situation, to strip it of all emotion and turn it into a legal dispute. He was taking my brother's soul and labeling it intellectual property. He was taking his final wish and calling it a breach of contract. "That contract is with a dead man," I said, my voice dangerously low. "A man who was exploited and pushed to his breaking point. I don't think any court in the world would call that a depressive episode. They'd call it emotive." That's when my father erupted. "You have no right," he roared, getting to his feet, his face flushed with a terrifying, desperate rage. "No right to decide. Who do you think you are? You stood on the sidelines and judged him your entire life, and now you want to play the righteous savior? We have debts, Lena, a mountain of them. This isn't about your sentimental nonsense. This is about survival. That video is just some depressive crap. We have to think about the real world." The betrayal was so absolute, so swift, it stole my breath. He wasn't just disagreeing with me, he was invalidating Alex's pain, dismissing his final words as an inconvenience. My mother, seeing the confrontation escalating, wrung her hands. "Lena, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Your father is right. We have to be practical. Alex would want us to be practical." They had officially chosen their side. They were no longer my parents. They were Derek's business partners. My hand tightened protectively over the hard drive on the coffee table. "Practicality doesn't give you the right to desecrate his memory," I stated, my eyes locked on my father's. I saw the moment his desperation curdled into a decision. His eyes darted to the hard drive, and he took a step forward. "I'm not asking you," he said, his voice a low growl. "That drive belongs to this family." He lunged, not like a father, but like a thief, his hand reaching for the smooth black casing. I snatched it away, pulling it to my chest, my heart exploding in my ears. The battle for my brother's legacy had just become physical. Have you ever been so cornered that your only way out was to seek help from your enemy? After my father's lunge and my desperate escape from my own family home, I barricaded myself in my apartment. The hard drive felt like a cursed object, both a shield and a target. Derek's legal threats echoed in my mind, and the image of my father's face, twisted with a rage born of financial terror, was seared behind my eyelids. I was alone. A quiet archivist against a cynical businessman and the two people I was supposed to trust most in the world. I couldn't win a fight on their terms. I needed a different kind of weapon. I needed an ally who understood the battlefield better than I did. So I spent the next few hours doing something I had always avoided. I delved into the world of commentary channels, the ecosystem of critics and commentators that fed on creators like my brother. I typed Alex Unfiltered Toxic into the search bar, and one name appeared more than any other: Marcus Thorne. His channel was called Thorn in Your Side, and he was, without a doubt, my brother's most vicious, most articulate, and most relentless critic. I watched a video of his, a 20-minute diatribe that methodically dismantled one of Alex's most popular prank series. He called my brother a primary purveyor of the emotional junk food that's rotting the brains of a generation. He called his content a masterclass in performative authenticity. He called his fan base a cult of personality built on a foundation of manufactured drama. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and I hated him for it. I hated his smug intellectualism, his cold dissection of something that, for all its flaws, had been my brother's life. I almost closed the browser, disgusted and defeated. But then I forced myself to listen not to his insults, but to his argument. What if he was right? Not about Alex being a bad person, but about the world he was trapped in. Thorne was describing the cage, not the animal inside it. He was talking about the immense pressure to escalate, the psychological toll of living your life through a lens, the way the algorithm rewards emotional chaos over genuine connection. He was, without knowing it, describing the very prison Alex had confessed to in his private diaries. Thorne was the enemy of Alex Unfiltered, the brand. But he might just be an ally to Alex Petrov, the victim. A plan began to form, a wild, desperate, and terrifying gamble. It felt like a profound betrayal, a violation of the very privacy I was fighting to protect. But what was the alternative? To let Derek and my parents seize control, to let them edit, package, and sell the sanitized version of his pain for years to come? To honor his request to be erased, I first had to reveal a piece of him. I had to fight fire with fire. I had to leak a piece of the truth to the one person who might understand its explosive power. I created a new email account, anonymous and untraceable, thearchivist29a proton.me. My hands shook as I opened a video editing program. I couldn't send the entire diary. It was too raw, too personal. I just needed one piece, a single, undeniable fragment of his truth. I selected 60 seconds from his final video, the moment his forced bravado completely shattered, the moment he begged the void to erase me. It was the most painful minute of footage I had ever seen. I attached the small file to the email, the recipient, the public contact address for Thorn in Your Side. I wrote no subject and no message. The video would have to speak for itself. For a long time, my finger hovered over the send button. This was an irreversible act. This was either salvation or a match thrown on a gallon of gasoline. I clicked send. How long does it take to start a firestorm? In the digital age, less than 24 hours. After sending the email to Marcus Thorne, I fell into a state of suspended animation. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark of my living room, the laptop open, refreshing his channel page with a ritualistic, obsessive rhythm. I was both terrified he would ignore it and terrified of what he would do if he didn't. Had I just handed a loaded gun to my brother's harshest critic? Or had I passed a torch to his only potential savior? The notification popped up at 6:45 the next morning, a new video from Thorn in Your Side. The title wasn't his usual snarky clickbait. It was stark and serious, on Alex Unfiltered and being wrong. My breath caught in my chest. This was it. I clicked the link, my hand trembling so hard I almost missed. The video opened not on Thorn's face but on a black screen with white text. Yesterday, I received an anonymous email containing a video file. I have verified its authenticity. You are about to see a 60-second clip. Viewer discretion is advised. Then, it appeared. My brother's face, raw and broken, filling the screen. His shattered whisper echoed in the dead quiet of my apartment. I can't pretend anymore. Please, if anyone ever sees this, just erase everything. The 60 seconds felt like an eternity and an instant. When the clip ended, the screen cut to Marcus Thorne. He wasn't in his usual slick studio setup. He was in what looked like a home office. The lighting was soft, and he wasn't wearing his usual smug, condescending smirk. He just looked tired, and deeply, profoundly shaken. For 3 years, he began, his voice low and devoid of its usual performative cadence. I have used this platform to criticize Alex Unfiltered. I called his content toxic. I called him a sellout. I called him a symptom of a diseased culture. He paused, looking directly into the camera, his gaze unflinching. I was right about the culture, but I was wrong about the man. I was so focused on the persona, on the brand, that I failed to see the person who was suffocating underneath it. I reviewed a product. I never considered the cost of its production. He didn't just play the clip. He contextualized it. He spoke about the creator economy, about the relentless pressure for engagement, about the way the system incentivizes performers to sacrifice their mental health for metrics. He took the very criticisms he had once leveled at my brother and turned them into a searing indictment of the industry that had created him. And then, he did something I never expected. He apologized. I can't know for sure, he said, but I have to believe that my voice, my criticism, was part of the weight that was crushing him. And for that, I am truly and deeply sorry. He ended the video with a call to action. It wasn't for subscribers or for likes. The video you just saw, he said, his voice regaining a sliver of its old fire, was a man's last will and testament, and his last wish was to be erased. As a community, we can grant him that wish. His management is planning to release posthumous content. We cannot let that happen. He looked into the camera one last time. Let's give him the peace in death that he never had in life. Let's make his last wish come true. The screen faded to black, and 2 words appeared in white text. Erase Alex. The fire was lit. I had no idea how big it was about to become. What does a wildfire look like from the epicenter? It's not a distant plume of smoke. It's the heat, the roar, the suffocating ash. The hashtag didn't just trend, it detonated. Within 12 hours, Erase Alex was the #1 topic worldwide. My quiet, desperate act of sending a single video clip had armed an entire army. My phone became a vibrating rectangle of ceaseless fury, a portal to a war I had started but no longer controlled. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a David and Goliath battle for a dead man's soul. The first crack in Derek's fortress appeared within 48 hours. The primary sponsor of the channel, an energy drink company that had built its brand on authentic, extreme content, released a statement. It was a masterpiece of corporate non-apology, full of phrases like deeply concerned, re-evaluating our partnership, and our thoughts are with the family during this difficult time. It was blood in the water. By the end of the day, 3 more major sponsors had followed suit, severing ties with the Alex Unfiltered brand. The asset was officially toxic. I didn't hear from Derek directly. A man like him doesn't admit defeat personally. The surrender came in the form of a cold, sterile email from his lawyer. It stated that, in light of recent public sentiment and unforeseen brand complications, his company would be ceasing all production of posthumous content and relinquishing all claims to the unaired footage. There was no mention of Alex's wishes, no acknowledgement of the video diaries. It was a business decision, a calculated retreat from a toxic investment. I had won. The machine had been stopped. But the shrapnel from the explosion had to land somewhere. It landed on my parents' front lawn. They were publicly crucified. News vans parked on their street. Tabloid articles ran their pictures with headlines like, "Greedy parents try to profit from son's suicide." They became the villains in the public narrative, the faces of exploitation. Their desperation, which I knew was real, was flattened into one-dimensional greed. I tried calling them. Their phones were off. I drove to their house, but the curtains were drawn, and they didn't answer the door. I had achieved my goal. The channel went silent. No new videos appeared. The onslaught of manufactured grief was replaced by a genuine, if chaotic, conversation about mental health in the media. I had won, but the victory felt like ashes in my mouth. I had saved my brother's legacy, but in doing so, I had publicly destroyed my parents and shattered what little was left of my family. I sat alone in my apartment, the silence heavier than ever before. The victorious warrior with no one left to celebrate with, and nothing to celebrate but the ruins I had created. The instrument of surrender didn't arrive with a white flag, but in a crisp manila envelope delivered by a courier who was blissfully unaware of the war he was officially ending. Inside, on heavy, expensive paper, was a legally binding document. It was a transfer of ownership, an abdication. With a few strokes of a pen in a distant, sanitized office, Derek had handed me the keys to my brother's kingdom. All rights, all passwords, all control of the Alex Unfiltered channel, with its 12 million subscribers and its billions of views, now belonged to me. The power to fulfill my brother's last wish was finally, irrevocably, in my hands. For several hours, I just sat with it. The laptop remained closed. The drive lay dormant. What does one do with the absolute power to erase a person's public existence? I felt like a museum curator who had just been given the authority to burn a famous but fraudulent painting. The world saw it as a masterpiece, a valuable asset. Only I knew it was a forgery, a beautiful lie that was slowly poisoning the legacy of the true artist. My job was not to destroy, but to correct the record. And the only way to do that was with fire. Finally, I opened the laptop. I navigated to the login page, my fingers typing in the credentials provided in the legal letter. I was in. The creator dashboard was a riot of color and data, an epileptic's nightmare of analytics and growth charts. It was the vital signs monitor for a ghost, and the line was still trending upward. I saw the grid of his videos, a mosaic of his manufactured self. Hundreds of thumbnails, each a carefully crafted mask of joy, shock, or excitement. An entire life, laid out for consumption. A false life. My cursor hovered over the settings icon. Was this what he wanted? Truly? A flicker of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through my resolve. To destroy all this. It felt like a second death. This digital ghost was all that was left of him in the public square. Was erasing it an act of mercy or an act of ultimate annihilation? Then I remembered his voice from the diary, not the booming persona from the videos, but the broken whisper of the boy in the dark. Please, just erase everything. My duty was not to the ghost the world knew. It was to the brother only I had heard. I navigated through the menus, each click feeling deliberate and heavy, a step in a solemn procession. The platform didn't make it easy. They buried the option, hiding it behind warnings and extra steps. Are you sure you want to permanently delete your channel? I clicked, yes. A new box appeared, a final checkpoint. It asked me to type the channel's name to confirm. My fingers typed Alex Unfiltered. The final button appeared. Delete channel. For a moment, my finger hovered over the trackpad. This was it. The irreversible act. The final fulfillment of a promise. I clicked it. The page refreshed. The dashboard, the analytics, the grid of screaming thumbnails, all of it vanished. It was replaced by 4 simple words. This channel does not exist. The roar was over. There was only silence. I hadn't destroyed him. I had finally brought him home. A year is long enough for a hashtag to become a historical footnote, but not long enough for a scar to fade. The world moved on, as it always does, to the next tragedy, the next outrage. But I remained. I left my job at the museum, trading the quiet dust of physical history for the chaotic, humming static of the digital present. My work now is building a different kind of archive, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to providing mental health resources for digital creators. I use my brother's story, anonymously, carefully, as the founding principle. That behind every brand there is a person, and their well-being is not a metric to be optimized. The silence between my parents and me became a permanent fixture, a new, cold wall built in the center of our lives. We didn't speak on holidays or birthdays. The gulf of what we had done to each other was too wide, too full of unspoken accusations and raw, unforgivable pain. I had won the war for my brother's soul, but the cost was my family. It was a price I paid every single day, in the quiet moments when I'd reach for my phone to call my mom and then remember I couldn't. The victory was his, but the exile was mine. Then, last Tuesday, a package arrived. It was a simple cardboard box, addressed in my mother's familiar, elegant script. I left it by the door for a full day, afraid to open it. I imagined it was full of legal papers, a final volley in a war I thought was over, or perhaps a collection of Alex's things meant to inflict a final punishing wave of grief. When I finally cut the tape, my hands were not quite steady. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was not a weapon, but an artifact. A thick, worn, leather-bound photo album from our childhood. I sat on the floor and opened it. And there he was. Not Alex Unfiltered, the manic, screaming persona, but Alex, a 7-year-old with a gap-toothed grin, holding up a ridiculously small fish, a 12-year-old with a terrible haircut, proudly clutching his first electric guitar, a 17-year-old in a rented tuxedo, looking impossibly young and terrified, pinning a corsage on his prom date's wrist. Page after page, a life unfolded in faded Kodachrome. It was the authentic, unedited raw footage of his existence, the archive I had been fighting to protect. I turned the last page. Tucked into the plastic sleeve was a small, folded piece of notepaper. It was from my mother. Her handwriting was a little shaky. It wasn't an apology, not an explanation, not an attempt to bridge the chasm between us. It was something simpler and infinitely more powerful. 5 words. Thank you for letting us remember him like this. Tears streamed down my face, not of sadness, but of a quiet, painful, and overwhelming sense of release. In that moment, I finally understood. I hadn't erased my brother. By deleting the digital ghost, by silencing the deafening noise of the brand, I had given him back to us. I had given us back the quiet space where we could finally, truly, remember the boy in the pictures.